Back in 1962, the United Nations was literally on the brink of going broke. And why? Well, it all came down to this high-stakes standoff over a really simple question. Who foots the bill for peace? The answer, it turns out, was hiding in a single legal document that would completely change the game for global politics.
I mean, it sounds like a simple question, right? Who pays when the world needs saving? But think about it. The consequences are absolutely enormous. Is it on every single nation to chip in, or just the ones who actually voted for a mission? This wasn't some academic debate. This exact question sparked a full-blown international crisis.
Seriously, the UN was staring down the barrel of complete financial collapse. You've got these massive, expensive peacekeeping operations going on, and at the same time, some of the most powerful countries in the world were just refusing to pay their share. This wasn't just a budget shortfall, it threatened the very existence of the entire organization.
So to really get how this all went down, here's our game plan. We're going to look at the money crisis that kicked this whole thing off. Then we'll see the exact question that got sent to the world's highest court. We'll dive into the high-stakes legal battle that erupted, check out the court's final answer, and then, most importantly, talk about why this 60-year-old decision still matters so much today.
Okay, so the whole crisis really ignited with two of the biggest, most expensive jobs the UN had ever attempted. We're talking massive peacekeeping missions in the Congo, which had just gained its independence, and in the super volatile Middle East. So you've got this picture, right? The UN is sending peacekeepers out to these global hotspots, trying to keep things from boiling over. But back at headquarters, a full-on financial rebellion was kicking off. You had huge players like the Soviet Union and France flat out refusing to pay up. Their argument was pretty simple. They said only the elite Security Council, the big guns, could okay spending on this stuff, not the entire General Assembly. This one move basically choked off the UN's cash flow, pushing it right to the edge of bankruptcy.
Okay, so with the whole organization's future hanging in the balance, the General Assembly decided to make a really bold move. They basically took this messy political fight and turned it into a legal question. They decided to ask the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice, for an answer.
And this, right here, this is the actual document, dated December 21st, 1961. This is the real request they sent. It's an amazing piece of history, right? It's the UN formally asking the court to, weigh in on its own rulebook, the UN Charter.
Now, the question itself sounds, kind of dry and technical, doesn't it? It's asking if the costs for these big missions constitute expenses of the organization under Article 17. But don't let the legal jargon fool you. The answer to this one little question would decide everything. Could the UN actually fund its most important work? And crucially, who had the power to give that funding the green light?
And wow, did this question spark a debate. This was so much more than just an argument over accounting. It was a full-on clash between two totally different ideas of what the United Nations should even be.
So let's break down the two sides of this fight. In one corner, you had countries like the Soviets and France arguing that peacekeeping is action. And in the UN Charter, action is a power that belongs only to the powerful Security Council. So for them, these costs weren't regular expenses at all. But in the other corner, you had a different group saying, hang on, expenses means, all expenses. They argue that the General Assembly, where every country gets a vote, holds the real power of the purse. They saw the Security Council's role as important, or primary, but definitely not exclusive.
And this really shows you just how big a deal this was globally. We're not talking about a small disagreement here. Just look at this list of countries that actually submitted formal legal arguments. You've got the US, the USSR, the UK, France, Canada, Australia, and Japan. I mean, the list just keeps going. All the major world powers jumped into the ring. This was a true international showdown. So, after months of deliberation and legal arguments, the big day finally arrived. On July 20th, 1962, the International Court of Justice was ready to give its answer. And believe me, the whole world was watching.
And the verdict was a 9-5 vote. So a clear majority, for sure. But those 5 votes against, they tell you just how contentious this was, how deeply divided the world really was on this fundamental question. So, you're probably wondering, how did the court come to this decision? Well, first, they tackled that word expenses. They basically said, let's look at the plain meaning here. And they decided that the UN Charter meant exactly what it sounds like. Expenses covers all the costs needed to get the UN's job done, not just some narrow, regular administrative budget. All right, next up was the whole responsibility issue. And this is where the court made a really crucial distinction. They said, yes, the Security Council has primary responsibility for keeping the peace, but, and this is the key part, primary does not mean exclusive. That little difference in wording opened the door for the General Assembly, which represents everybody, to have a major role.
And then came the final piece, the absolute clincher, that word action. The court made a landmark ruling here. They said that when the Charter talks about action being reserved for the Security Council, it's talking about one very specific thing, coercive military force, enforcement measures. Since these peacekeeping missions were based on the consent of the countries involved, they weren't action in that sense. And that, right there, was the key that unlocked the General Assembly's power to fund them.
Okay, so a complicated legal ruling from way back in 1962. Why does any of this matter to us today? Well, because its impact has been absolutely massive, and it's still shaping our world in ways you might not even realize.
Let's boil it down to the three biggest legacies. First, it cemented this idea of collective responsibility. That means all members have to pay their fair share of the UN's bills. Simple as that. Second, it locked down the power of the purse for the General Assembly, making sure that the entire organization gets a say in the budget. And third, and maybe most importantly, this ruling built the entire legal and financial foundation for modern peacekeeping. Seriously, without it, the blue helmets that we see all over the world today might not even exist.
When you peel it all back, this whole case was really about a timeless question. Who gets the final say on keeping the peace? Should it be the powerful few, represented by the Security Council, or the collective many, represented by the General Assembly? This court decision definitely tilted the financial power toward the many. But that fundamental debate about who really gets to call the shots on war and peace, well, that's a conversation that is still very much alive today.